Hello and welcome. You're watching Coronavirus Facts versus Myths. I'm Gargi Rawat. Today, a special focus on schools and children in regard to COVID. With cases of COVID declining in the country and the vaccination rate increasing, many states started reopening schools from today. Schools started resuming in-person classes with all COVID rules in place. In Delhi, schools are reopening in a phased manner. Classes 9 to 12 open today. However, attendance is not mandatory and online classes continue. Madhya Pradesh schools are reopening from classes 6 to 12 from today with 50% capacity. Tamil Nadu as well. Schools for classes 9 to 12 start with 50% capacity. In Telangana, all classes, colleges, coaching centers are open. It's not mandatory. While in Uttar Pradesh, schools have opened for classes 1 to 5. That started today. In fact, senior classes had opened earlier as well. They had opened from the 16th of August. Now, some states where schools opened earlier are seeing a rise in infection among children, and this, of course, has raised concerns. Cases in point are in 6 states, Punjab, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, Chhattisgarh and Uttarakhand. In Jharkhand and Chandigarh, though, the trend is opposite. The biggest spike in infection among children has been seen in Punjab between July and August. The figures there have grown by 9.6%. Schools in the state had reopened from the 2nd of August. So a big jump in infections in children there in Bihar, as you can see. And this comes ahead of schools reopening in other states as well. But having said that, the president of the Indian Medical Association, Dr. J.A. Jayalal, spoke on the issue of schools reopening, and he said that the time is right, that this is the right time for governments to take a calculated risk and resume classes, given that vaccination is taking place, given that cases are low. Well, to talk more about this, we're now joined by Dr. Lancelot Pinto, consultant pulmonologist and epidemiologist, Hinduja Hospital. We're joined by Dr. Sameer Parekh, psychiatrist, director, Fortis National Mental Health Program, and Prajita Gautam, president, Delhi Parents Association. Thank you all for joining us. And first to you, Dr. Pinto, you've been somebody who's really been advocating for reopening schools. There are concerns among a lot of the parents still, and now we have this cases rising in Punjab and other states where schools reopen. So we have that example. What would you say on that?
Hi, Gargi. Thanks for inviting me to the show. I think the concern is not so much about the rising number of cases. It's how many of them are severe enough that a child needs to be hospitalized or a poor outcome happens. And I think the experience consistently across the world, especially among younger kids, is that they do get infected, but most of these infections end up being very mild. I think the seroprevalence data from India also post the second wave suggested that a lot of children have already been infected during the first and second waves. And again, we didn't see a huge rise in hospitalizations or deaths. So I think there is going to be a rise in infections possibly. There are going to be sporadic cases of rises in infection once schools open. But I think that has to be taken in the context of the huge loss that children face if they don't go to school. So to assume that not going to school has zero risks is not the right way to look at the situation. So I think this has to be a dynamic process. We need to constantly analyze experiences. If there is a rise in the background prevalence in a particular area, maybe it's time to shut down schools again for a short period of time and then reopen. So I think it's good that this is a dynamic process and we've at least started thinking about our children.
All right, Dr. Parekh, if you can, tell us a bit. A lot has been said about the impact this school closures had on children, a lot of the younger students. And if we talk about India, it's so different. If in urban areas, in rural areas, the impacts have been different. A lot of children have fallen into illiteracy in many rural parts. But if you could tell us more about the impact it's had on their minds.
Gargi, you're right. In a country like ours, we can't really generalize the impact on children because, like you said, urban, semi-urban, rural, at various levels, the interface has been also very different. Second aspect, all of us understand this, don't we? That what do children need? Children need outdoor spaces. Children need friends. And yes, children need an environment, which is a safe environment where they can learn and explore. And children have shown remarkable resilience. And it's time that we also now gradually start helping the normalization process, keeping all safety in mind because safety cannot be compromised. We should be willing to learn So that, and we also need to appreciate that children will also have a little bit of anxieties. After all, it's a change in cycle happening after a year and a half. How did you and I go back after a break, go back after a wave, go back after a quarantine or a lockdown? So the same applies to children. We need to be a bit slow. We need to help in the process, all of us collectively, and ensure that if at any moment in time we feel even a slight risk factor going on the other side, we should be willing to take a step back and be willing to learn. There is no fixed rule here. But one thing I want to say, which is very important, which is where media, colleagues, and I'm seeing that we have a parent here. All of us need to remember us being a role model of COVID appropriate behavior, encouraging children for COVID appropriate behavior is also equally important. In all these conversations about what is important, what is not important, we can't forget that our role is very important. So if as a parent, as a teacher, I am ensuring a behavior, keep educating the children, ensure they do it, that's how we'll be a lot better off and lot safer.
All right. Now, Prajita Gautam, I come to you as the president of the Parents Association in Delhi. As a parent yourself, I know you have, many worries, many apprehensions. Tell us a bit about what parents have said and your fears.
Parents are even not ready to send their kids. Let me share some data, current data with you. आप बहुत सारे स्कूल्स का आप देखिए. इनफैक्ट मेरे पास जो इन्फॉर्मेशन आई है, कुछ स्कूल में एक क्लास में केवल एक बच्चा पहुंचा है, और वो भी हमें पता चला है वो भी प्रिंसिपल का बेटा था. राइट. आप ये बताइए, दिस शोज कि पेरेंट्स आज भी मेंटली प्रिपेयर नहीं हैं. दोनों डॉक्टर्स यहाँ पे बैठे हुए हैं, मैं उनका रिस्पेक्ट करती हूँ, बट एक चीज और देखिए, ये हुई डॉक्टर्स का पर्सपेक्टिव. पेरेंट्स का पर्सपेक्टिव ये है, जब सेकेंड वेव में उन लोगों ने देखा है, उनके घर में जब कोरोना हिट हुआ है, बड़े किस तरीके से आज भी सरवाइव करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. इनफैक्ट डॉक्टर्स बैठे हैं, उनको पता है लंग फाइब्रोसिस क्या होता है. लंग फाइब्रोसिस अगर पैच छोड़ देता है तो उन लोगों की जो लाइफ है वो नॉर्मल नहीं रहती है. इट विल टेक अनदर 3 to 4 months उनको रिकवर होने में. ये सारी चीजें देखी जा रही हैं. एंड टॉप ऑफ दैट, जब नीति आयोग बोल चुका है, जब एमिनेंट और डॉक्टर्स भी बोल रहे हैं, लाइक हमारे साथ भी डॉक्टर्स हैं, डॉक्टर त्रिहान की हम बात करें, ICMR की रिपोर्ट है, सब कह रहे हैं कि थर्ड वेव आएगा, इट इज गोइंग टू हिट, बच्चों पर आएगा. और इसके अलावा हम साउथ अफ्रीका का देख लें, अमेरिका का देख लें, सारी चीजें ये शो कर रही है. प्लस आप जो अपने स्क्रीन में बार बार डेटा दिखा रहे हैं डिफरेंट स्टेट्स का, ये भी दिखा रहे हैं कि यस, बच्चों में इन्फेक्शन बढ़ रहा है, जो मेरे हिसाब से 9.6% से 16.6% तक जा रहा है. डिफरेंट स्टेट में वेरी कर रहा है. तो ये बताइए, जहाँ इतने दिन इंतजार किया, तो आप बच्चों की बात कर रहे हैं ना, हम पेरेंट्स कह रहे हैं हम नहीं भेजना चाहते. जब हम ये कहते हैं और 2 महीना वेट कर लीजिए, अगर हर कोई ये कह रहा है कि वेव आ रही है, केरला में हिट हो चुका है, हम बच्चों का देख रहे हैं, क्यों हम बच्चों को गिनी पिग बनाने को तैयार हैं? क्यों हम चाहें कि हम बच्चा चला जाए? इसके पीछे एक और रीजन है, हम बच्चों को अपने घरों में सेव करें. आई डू एग्री, उनका मेंटल फिजिकल ये डेवलपमेंट होना जरूरी है, बट आप एक चीज और सोचिए, पेरेंट के पर्सपेक्टिव से मेंटल और फिजिकल 2 दिन बाद करवा लेंगे, बच्चे को सेफ रखना जरूरी है. ये बेसिक चीजें अगर समझ आ जाएंगी, मुझे ऐसा लगता है सब लोगों को समझ आना शुरू हो जाए.
All right, Apraz, let me take your questions to Dr. Pinto. And this is something we've heard from a lot of parents that, okay, fine, you want schools to reopen and there's, this push to reopen schools, but what about the safety of children? One can understand also the trauma that, everybody's been through with the second wave of COVID, the kind of situation we saw here in Delhi, in Mumbai as well. In Kerala now cases are rising. So this is again, given rise to fears about a possible third wave.
So for the record, I just need to put it out there that I'm a parent of twins who are 7 years old, and I'm lobbying for them as much as I'm a doctor on this show. So all the concerns that have been raised are very valid, and I think this is never going to be mandatory. You can't force people to go back to school if parents are not ready. But at the same time, I think we need to take into consideration that everybody doesn't fit into a mold. There are children who get their midday meals at school, for example. We need to think about them as well. Right. There are children who don't have a digital device at home, or there is one cell phone which is shared by 5 members in the household who will not have access to digital learning as well. We need to take their voices into consideration as well. And of course, young children who need a social interaction, they need to hang out with their kids. They need to know what social interactions are all about. And I don't think anybody would want their kids growing up in an environment where everything is just digital and they haven't formed real bonds. I think these are concerns. Secondly, the concern about, the talk about the vaccine, it's taken us, January end was when we started vaccinating adults, and we have 50% of the country which has just received one dose after that duration of time. If we wait for all children to receive their 2 doses, we're talking about another year, probably a year and a half. Are we ready to deprive children of their social interactions, of their learning with their peers for another year, year and a half? Is something that also needs to be taken into consideration.
And the kind of steps that have been announced, we have the example of schools in the US and in UK. You have, in some schools, yes, there was a spike. There was a recent case in which a teacher was not vaccinated, and I think that teacher infected some 20 students because it kept taking off their mask and, lecturing the class. But those are certain cases. Having said that, the steps that are being taken now, asking students to mask, ensuring that the teachers and staff are vaccinated, and keeping the classes well ventilated. All this should help in ensuring the numbers remain down, Doctor?
Absolutely. So nobody is saying send children to school the way it was before without any precautions being taken. We will take every single precaution, and I think that needs to be mandated. The second thing is that we've opened things like restaurants, we've opened things like gyms. So how are we really protecting our children when their parents are out there in restaurants and gyms, lowering their masks, having meals, and returning back home to their children? So if we think that, places like restaurants and gyms are important for the economy and are important for health and happiness, I think it's a little paradoxical to say that it's okay to let children stay at home for their safety.
All right, Dr. Parekh, come in on, the younger children right now. Not too many states have opened schools for younger children. UP has just opened its schools for the younger classes, but the impact that this, period has had on them.
Okay, this is a tough one. To be honest, let's be honest to ourselves. There is not going to be a clear-cut solution and a clear-cut answer. All of the things that we are saying are all true. These are like several approach avoidance conflicts that the society finds itself in. We have to understand there is no compromise on safety. And both the parent anxiety, the teacher anxiety, the child anxiety has to be understood. There is no question around it. At the same time, like I said at the start, we also need to understand whether it's age group, and you're right. We are right now talking about adolescents. We're not talking about pre-primary, primary, right? Why are we doing that? Because we understand that there are differentiators. Similarly, like we talked about, that there are places where it's not only about literacy, it's also about nutrition. There are parts of our country where a midday meal has an absolute importance. And there are other limitations. So we will not be able to find one fit.
Exactly. So one size fits all is not happening. Finally, Prajita, Gautam, I understand your fears, and parents do have, and clearly this is a process that's evolving. Today you said in a certain class there was just one child. Maybe in a few weeks there'll be more children there, parents, teachers, everybody needs to work together so that we can get the children back in classes. Final word to you, ma'am.
गार्गी, मैं एक चीज और इसमें ऐड करना चाहती हूँ. बेशक हमारे डिप्टी सीएम कुछ भी कहते रहें, हम बहुत सारे स्कूल्स ने आज ही ऑनलाइन क्लास बंद कर दिया. ट्रस्ट मी, बिकॉज वी आर गोइंग टू राइट अ मेल टू डिप्टी सीएम ऑल्सो. आज फर्स्ट डे था, आज उनको कंपलसरी कर दिया, ऑफलाइन आना ही आना है. जो नहीं आएगा उन बच्चों का एब्सेंट लगाया है. आप ये देखिए किस टाइप का हरासमेंट है, और यही बात हम बहुत टाइम से कह रहे हैं. और रही बात डिजिटल डिवाइड की और मिड डे मील की, दिस इज द रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ऑफ एवरी स्टेट गवर्नमेंट. आपके ही प्रोग्राम में एक प्रोग्राम हुआ था लास्ट ईयर, जब प्रज्ञता गाइडलाइंस की बात हुई थी, जब सब कुछ उसमें दे रखा है बच्चों को डिजिटल डिवाइड के चलते हुए, जब आप टीवी चैनल्स के थ्रू पढ़ा सकते हैं, रेडियो के थ्रू पढ़ा सकते हैं, क्यों नहीं पढ़ा रहे? रही बात मिड डे मील की, आप बच्चों को घरों तक आप मील पहुंचवा दीजिए. प्रॉब्लम क्या है? बट व्हाई दे वांट टू टेक सिंगल पॉइंट रिस्क कि जहां पे बच्चे को कुछ हो जाएगा. सी देखिए, पेरेंट्स की पूरी लाइफ जो है बच्चों के इर्द गिर्द घूमती है.
All right, ma'am, we'll have to leave it there. I'm out of time, but clearly this is an issue we're going to keep discussing. You've raised some valid points, and clearly authorities, teachers, all of us need to work together to see the best way forward for the children. Thank you all for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.